Welcome back. What we are going to talk about today are some of the issues that you might have with collecting data. So I've got a big long list for you there. I'm not going to read through it because we're going to go through them each one at a time. First thing is bias. It's very easy to lie with statistics if you can manipulate the way that those statistics actually present. Even after you have the data, even if the data is good, you can kind of cherry pick different bits and pieces to make pretty much any statement you want sound plausible. But let's forget about that part. Let's go back to the actual survey itself. If you change the way that your question is worded, you can change the way that people are thinking as they're thinking about your question. And then that can change the answer that they give you. So there's a ton of, we're going to go through this whole thing. All tells you about kind of bias. The first one we're going to talk about is use of language. So if I wanted to manipulate whoever was taking my survey into telling me that ticket prices are too high so that I can say, yeah, all of these people agree with me. They all think they're too high. If that's what I wanted to do, I would say something like this right here. Don't you think the price of a movie ticket is too high? Because then, unless someone really strongly disagrees, they're probably going to just be either like, yeah, I guess so, or else if they already agreed with me, they're going to even more strongly agree now. Compare that to, do you think the price of a movie ticket is, and then lay out all of the options. This second way of wording this is a whole lot more neutral than this first way. So this first way is meant to kind of skew the results to what you want them to. This way down here, you can't really do that if you're presenting all of the options equally. Next thing is timing, and that's like referring to when you actually ask your questions. So in BC, there is a law, and you can get in a lot of trouble if you get in a collision during the winter because you don't have snow tires. There's actually a law in BC that you have to run winter tires in the winter. So let's say, we are the people who made that law way back whenever it was. Let's say we wanted to make this law a thing. That was our bias. We wanted to convince everyone that this should be mandatory. If we ask the question in August, should vehicles be required to have winter tires? Okay, that's a fairly neutral question, like thinking about the use of language back here. It's a fairly neutral question. But as the person who wants to manipulate this to be like, okay, I want people to tell me winter tires should be the law, I'm not going to ask this question in August. Because in August, the weather's nice, people aren't thinking about snow, so they're less likely to tell me, yeah, this should absolutely be mandatory. If I ask the exact same question, same wording and everything, but I wait for like a minus 40 blizzardy kind of day in January, I'm going to get a lot more people telling me, yes, winter tires should be mandatory in the winter. Next thing revolves around privacy. So if you have a question that kind of pushes the limits on personal privacy, people aren't always entirely truthful. So the example that I have here is that if you were asking people to step on a scale in front of other people, they might not be comfortable doing that, so they might not participate in your survey altogether. So let's say you wanted to do a study about the effect of exercise on body weight. People who are confident to step on a scale are going to be more likely to participate in that study, whereas people who aren't confident might not. So knowing that, you can change the way that you set up your question to be like, okay, I know that the people who are confident to step on this scale are probably the ones who are going to agree with me that exercise is important, and then you can skew your results kind of that way. Next thing is about cultural sensitivity. So when you are giving a survey, you're kind of making some assumptions. Like this question right here says, what is your favorite method of cooking ham? And then it lists out the three options, totally neutral with the word selection thing. But this implies, there's the assumption made, that everyone eats ham, everyone that you're giving this survey to. But not everyone actually does eat ham. And there's cultural reasons for that. So instead, what you could do is you could reword it to say, if you eat ham, name your favorite method of cooking it. You could say, give an option for not eating ham instead of just barbecue, baking, frying. There's a few different things you can do there, but it's kind of one of those things where you want to make sure that you're taking different cultures and different practices that way into consideration. Now we get into kind of some of the more logistical things. Surveys aren't free. Like the example I wrote here is printing, distributing, collecting, organizing data. That says date, should say data. A lot of things nowadays are online. But even so, like if you're going to post a questionnaire online, if people can't find it, you're not going to have any people take your questionnaire. So you got to pay for advertising. There's always going to be some kind of cost associated. If you are not getting much out of the survey, then all of the gains that you're making, all of the benefits, don't outweigh the costs. And so maybe you're going to think, well, okay, I'll save a little bit here, I'll save a little bit here. And if you cut corners that way to kind of try to stay on budget, well, now maybe the results aren't as good. Or maybe you didn't end up with enough data for it to be reliable. Like we talked about the coin flip example, 10 times versus 100, 100 is better, 1,000 is way better. Maybe if you have to cut corners, you don't get as big of a sample size, and now maybe your data isn't accurate to use that way. Ethics. If you wanted to, and this is where like companies selling your data, that kind of stuff, let's say you're having a birthday party and you want to know what kind of snacks you should get. So you ask everyone like, hey, I'm having this party, tell me what kind of snacks you want to be there, and then I can buy them. Okay, awesome. You had a neutrally worded question, you did all of your other stuff just fine, your costs were on point, like everything we've talked to up until now is good. Great, awesome party. But then 2 weeks later, you decide to open up a snack stand at lunchtime. And what you do is you use the information that you had from your classmates telling you their favorite snacks, and you only buy those, and now you target them specifically to those people who you know these are their favorite snacks. Well, that data that you got was not meant to be used to sell things to those people. Like your classmates thought that you were getting this data so that you could organize a sweet party, not so that you could target them with your future advertising. So that's where kind of the ethical questions come in here. And then the other thing to think about is time. Like if you have a survey that takes 30 seconds, most people probably not going to have a problem with that, but how much information can you really get from someone in 30 seconds? Other end of the spectrum is if you have a 30-minute survey, like yeah, you're going to get a ton of information out of these people, but how many people actually want to sit down and do a 30-minute survey if there's nothing in it for them? Like, you know how a lot of stores nowadays are doing this like thing where it's complete this survey and we'll enter you into a draw for a $1,000 gift card? Like that's kind of what they're trying to do, is they're trying to make up for the time that they're taking from you by offering some kind of reward for you. Other thing with really long surveys is that by the time you get to the end of it, you're oftentimes not even thinking very much about your answers. You're just like checking kind of the middle checkbox so that it's done and then you're finished with it, because it takes a lot more brain power for a longer survey. Okay, here's some homework for you to do and then we'll move on to the next section.